You ever been there when an uncomfortable question about race comes up, but you don't know how to answer? That's where Code Switch lives. Each week, we're talking about race and how it intersects with every other aspect of your life, from politics and pop culture to history and food. Listen now to the Code Switch podcast from NPR.
Charges dismissed against 17 Austin police officers accused of assault during racial justice protests of 2020. Details and more today on The Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. Andrew Weber of KUT in Austin on why the Travis County DA has decided not to pursue charges against police accused of shooting foam and beanbag rounds into groups of demonstrators. A prison assault and what records suggest about a lack of transparency over security and safety in Texas lockups. Worried about the power grid holding this winter? Why Houston Chronicle columnist Chris Tomlinson says he, for one, isn't. And a tradition for football fans of the Cowboys, hundreds of miles from Big D. All that and much more today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on the 6th day of December. I'm David Brown, and, well, it's one for the record books, all right. The fourth special session of the Texas legislature gavelled out on Tuesday, the 246th day that lawmakers have spent at the Capitol this year. That's more legislative days than any previous year since statehood in 1845. And again, the legislature didn't pass the school voucher-like plan pushed by the governor in the name of school choice. But Republicans in the ledge did win some battles before closing up, including a plan to empower Texas police to arrest people who illegally cross the border from Mexico. That measure, Senate Bill 4, is almost certain to be a magnet for lawsuits challenging its constitutionality and feared by many who incite racial profiling by police. Speaking of controversies involving police, let's zoom in on police in the Texas capital city. You'll likely recall the racial justice protests of 2020 and aggravated assault charges brought against some 21 Austin police officers for firing projectiles, what police described as less lethal rounds like foam and beanbags, into crowds of demonstrators. During those protests, a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old were hit in the head and sent to the hospital where they were treated for brain injuries. That brought renewed scrutiny to Austin PD's crowd control methods. The city of Austin eventually paid out $18 million in civil settlements related to Austin's police response. But this week, Travis County District Attorney Jose Garza dropped assault charges against 17 Austin police officers. Andrew Weber reports on criminal justice and policing at our home station, KUT News. Andrew, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
What did Garza say about why he dropped most of the charges against most of the police officers that had been indicted?
It was sort of an informal, well, I guess now formal deal with the city of Austin, with Mayor Kirk Watson here, and with APD, the interim chief, Robin Henderson. The idea was that they dropped these charges, and they essentially asked the DOJ, the Justice Department, to take a look at Austin's response over this weekend. So they essentially dropped these charges and, turned it over to the feds to say, okay, if we did something wrong, you need to tell us. And that's not to say that there won't be charges pursued. There are 4 additional officers, or 4 of those 21 officers. His office is still pursuing charges against them.
Well, what does this mean for the 17 officers who've now been at least cleared of the local charges that they faced?
They will go back to work, and I think this is kind of a deal to sort of mend fences with between City Hall and the police union here, and DA Garza's office, because he's a candidate. He was a candidate who ran on a platform to prosecute police misconduct, and that hasn't gone over well with folks in the police union and rank and file folks here in Austin. And so Watson, Mayor Watson here in Austin tried to essentially broker this deal to restart negotiations for a long-term labor contract that have been very, very much mired for the last couple of years.
What's known about the remaining 4 officers still facing assault charges?
Not much. I don't know who they are yet. The DA's office has not confirmed that. I talked to them last night at about 6 p.m. They're waiting on court processes, because that sometimes takes a while. to confirm who these 4 officers are, and then we'll figure out from there.
Is there any reason to believe that the DOJ will, in fact, be bringing charges against some of these officers who are now off the hook locally?
I don't believe they would be able to bring charges. I think that this is played out in local courts. The DOJ would be able to. This has happened in Austin before. Probably 15 years ago. They reviewed patterns and practices. That's what they call it. Mm-hmm. So they essentially review how APD functions, how it works, the response in this specific incident, and they can either make suggestions, or if they find something is grievously wrong or potentially illegal, they could have oversight regulation over the department.
Just recently, though, and this is a completely separate case, there was an Austin police officer named Christopher Taylor who faced mistrial twice over the shooting death of a man named Mike Ramos back in 2020. Now we have these separate charges being dropped. Again, separate incidents. But I think a lot of people wondering, is there a reason that DA Garza is having a hard time getting convictions here, or deciding, at least in the latter case, not to pursue?
Yes, sir. I think it depends on who you ask. But I think objectively, there's a high burden of proof for any of these cases. For any, we put a lot of faith and a lot of trust and give cops a lot of latitude because we train them to make sort of split-second decisions. Their training involves using maybe potentially lethal force, or force like in this instance with folks who were hit by the beanbag rounds and some foam bullets. So proving that there's malice or proving that there's any ill will or intent is hard to do. And I think folks who are in the police union would argue these charges maybe weren't completely well founded to begin with, and that DA Garza is sort of prosecuting and then investigating after the fact.
Andrew Weber reports on criminal justice and policing for KUT News. We're going to link to his reporting at texasstandard.org. Andrew, thanks.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
For nearly 3 months, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has fought to keep secret details of an assault inside one of its prisons. Experts reviewing open records requests from Texas Public Radio say the department has used what they describe as legal loopholes to block the public from understanding what happened. Critics say this lack of transparency on how the prison operates can stymie efforts to improve the safety of prisoners and guards. Paul Flav of Texas Public Radio reports.
When Kaheem Grant's mother, Loretta, found out her son was in a prison hospital after he was assaulted by one or potentially multiple guards, she wanted to know what happened and how bad it was. She, as his power of attorney, asked for his medical records.
No, they won't give it to me. They told me to call the PI, then they told me to call the medical board over there in Galveston. They're giving me the runaround. That's why, because they don't give the family too much information.
The department's been equally opaque with public records requests dealing with the incident. They employ arguments to the Attorney General's office to keep records out of the public domain that are in some cases misapplied, say experts, and in others highlight problems in the public records laws. The first is the prisoner exception. The Texas Public Information Act has a carve-out that doesn't allow information about an inmate to be released except in terms of where they are located, why they're inside, when they could get out. In many cases, that's about it.
Well, I think there are certain things about incarcerated people that should remain private, and their entire lives don't become subject to public scrutiny just because they're incarcerated.
Michelle Deitch is the director of the Prison and Jail Innovation Lab at UT Austin. She says it's intended to give dignity and privacy to incarcerated people. But
I think that it could also be a loophole that is much too large and can be used as a way to deny information that should absolutely be public.
In briefs to the AG's office, the state's argued it can't release disciplinary records of guards who were present when Kaheem Grant was beaten because those incidents, quote, relate to a prisoner. It argued the same thing for aggregate excessive force data. Molly Pachenik is a staff attorney at the Texas Civil Rights Project.
I mean, clearly they're using it in ways that it wasn't intended to be used.
All TDCJ has said is an unnamed inmate was hospitalized after an extraction team used excessive force. No use of force report nor any report listing involved parties. Keeping information private because it, quote, relates to a prisoner would basically be all information in a prison.
Well, I think they understand that very few, if any, people are in a position to challenge AG rulings, whether that's lack of resources or being scared out of it. I think a war of attrition is a good metaphor.
Bill Ailshire agrees.
That's not a good attitude toward transparency, but they're not alone.
The lawyer focuses on government accountability and transparency, and he says the documents TPR has requested are absolutely public and, in fact, are required for disclosure. TDCJ argues releasing use of force reports or incident reports could hurt an ongoing investigation, but these documents are often available through other law enforcement agencies, including the department's own Inspector General, which released the incident report to TPR, contradicting TDCJ's arguments. Ailshire says even if it does impact the investigation, the fact that it was a crime against an inmate means they must release these basic documents.
That information is subject to required disclosure, and that means they can't use the litigation exception, for example.
The litigation exception basically says that because there are indications the state could be sued, they aren't required to release it. It's another of the exceptions they've claimed for a number of TPR requests. It isn't just TDCJ that uses this argument to get around open records requests. Ailshire finds it in every level of Texas government.
I just don't think they have a good idea of what their job is in terms of being public servants. They can't be accountable to the public if everything they do, particularly every mistake that might be made, is concealed from the people who own that government.
More importantly, the documents can always be redacted, which the state has not offered to do, and in some cases is argued would be meaningless because TPR essentially knows too much already. In an email, a TDCJ spokeswoman says she disagrees with the opinion that it misapplies exceptions. She says they follow the law, respond to more than 1,500 open records requests a month, and are dedicated to providing the community with information. For now, TPR awaits a response from the Attorney General on whether TDCJ must release the documents. I'm Paul Flav in San Antonio.
And Wells Dunbar is standing by. He's our social media editor, and he's been monitoring what Texans are talking about online on this Wednesday. Hello, Wells.
Howdy, David. Well, as you mentioned at the top of the show, that's a wrap for the fourth special session of the Texas legislature. A mixed bag for Governor Greg Abbott, who made the call, netting new border legislation, certain to inspire lawsuits, but failing in this fourth overtime round to push through a voucher program. Here's what some of folks are saying on our Facebook page. Robin Richter notes the end of the special session without addressing funding for public schools and without passing legislation to deal with lawsuits holding up implementation of the approved constitutional amendments, referring there to a Senate bill added in the final days of this special session that would have done just that. More folks chiming in about this and plenty of other topics, David. I'll be back with more responses and reactions from social media at the end of the program.
Keep them coming in. Look for Texas Standard on your social media platform of choice. Wells back in about 35 minutes or so. Hey, if someone were to ask you, what is the ultimate book about Texas, the definitive book, what would you say? Would you be looking in the fiction section or the research section? There's more on that just ahead. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Enel North America, generating renewable energy with projects run by and for Texans, investing in the future of local communities, schools, and small businesses. Learn more at enelnorthamerica.com/Texas.
Business and Your Money on the Standard. I'm David Brown. A new study shows electric vehicles remain a tough sell among many in the Lone Star State. But as Houston Public Media's Rebecca Noel reports, interest in EVs is still trending up over time.
According to the new report from the University of Houston and Texas Southern University, only 5.1% of Texans surveyed currently drive an electric car, and just under 60% said they wouldn't consider one in the future. However, that proportion is down from 63% a year ago. In fact, interest in EVs has been steadily trending up over time nationwide. According to the study, millennials and Gen Z were the most likely to consider buying an electric vehicle. Of those who said they still would not consider purchasing an EV, nearly half cited scarcity of charging stations as the main reason. Others cited higher purchase prices. Just this year, the Texas legislature imposed an extra $200 tax on new electric vehicle owners in the state, in addition to a $400 registration fee. Legislators say it's to offset the tax revenue lost from gasoline sales. I'm Rebecca Noel in Houston.
Support for Coverage of Business comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' comp provider committed to protecting Texas employers by investigating fraud and focused on preventing abuse of the system. More at texasmutual.com/fraud.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. What is the definitive book about Texas? Well, some might think of iconic works from authors like Larry McMurtry and Cormac McCarthy, Lonesome Dove, Blood Meridian, and the like. But others might point you to a special book on the nonfiction side of the library, and like Texas itself, always changing and evolving. First published in 1857, the Texas Almanac has evolved and changed hands several times through the early years of Texas statehood, the Civil War and Reconstruction, the 1900s oil boom, dozens of busts, and the state's ascent as an economic powerhouse. In 2008, the Texas State Historical Association assumed the responsibility of publishing the venerated Texas Almanac. And now Rosie Hatch is the managing editor, and she joins us to talk about the latest edition, just now hitting shelves. Rosie, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you.
For folks out there who may not have encountered the Texas Almanac, and it's hard to believe there are many longtime Texans who haven't, how would you describe the Almanac? What's in there? How do people use it?
Well, I'd say everything's in there. Obviously not everything, or else it would be 3 times as long. But if you have a question about Texas, the answers can be found in the Almanac.
Let me ask you about the desire to stick with a physical book. Why these days? I mean, I can imagine that people, and in fact, I've seen this in the past, people have often collected past editions. You know, you'll look at it, it's like an encyclopedia of Texas almanacs. And now you're on, what is it, the 72nd edition? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I think it's tradition more than anything else. It's a little hard to give up something that has, like you said, been published since 1857. But it definitely has to evolve more with the times, and that's something we're going to be looking into.
Well, it seems like it's already evolving, because I know that when I need some information about Texas real fast, I'm going to be talking with someone like yourself, and I want to find out, wait a minute, when was such and such a town founded, or what's the story that people are talking about that I haven't heard of before? I've often just gone to Texas Almanac online and found the answers I'm looking for. How do you make the decision about what to include and what not to include? And I mean, that's got to be tough.
Yes. What we're trying to do more with the book is make it more of less of an encyclopedia, dry and just pages and pages of tables of numbers. But we're trying to add stories about and commentary about like what has been happening in Texas during the past 2 years, and what kind of challenges is Texas facing while this next book's going to be, the fresh new one. So I was really honored and excited this year for the 2024 edition. I made some friends over at the Texas Tribune, and they were able to give us some features for a couple more chapters. And they're just short essays about what Texas has faced in the past 2 years, what's on our minds in a couple of different topics. So we have sports, which is obviously, just who wins, who loses, who's up,
but it's a big deal
down.
Here in Texas.
Absolutely.
Clearly. Yeah.
We have one about climate, because we have a weather chapter, obviously, but just showing different temperatures isn't always going to tell the whole story. And then obviously education, we have a politics section, politics essay by the Texas Tribune. So I'm trying to kind of make the book more of a story.
What else has changed in the new edition of the Texas Almanac? I mean, I know that some things don't change. You have 254 counties, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. But there must be other things. What do you go back through old newspapers or and look for events or things that may have come up in the past couple of years?
Not events so much. We obviously have an obituary section, so we always keep track of what's going on. What I would say is changing is the way we present the information, and if we find that there's a topic that we have ignored in the past, we try and make space for it.
Are there any particular topics in the Texas Almanac that stand out as your favorites in this new edition?
I really, really love our feature article this year, written by Nora Ankrum. She works for the University of Texas Energy Institute, and she kind of wrote 3 articles in one. One of them is like a brief history of the wind power industry in Texas.
Yeah, we're number 1 in wind power, for those who don't know.
That's right. And before it was an industry, it was just windmills on people's farms, and it was still very important to Texans. And then there's another shorter article about natural gas, because obviously that one is also big, and it's changing a lot of the coastline. My family is down from by Corpus Christi, so we keep watching this new bridge go in and missing the Harbor Bridge. It's such an icon. It won't be there for very much longer. But
yeah.
And then the other article is just a basic history and where we might be headed of energy industry in Texas. It touches on both how the electricity grid was developed, including how LBJ was so impactful in rural Texas, why it is the way it is today. We also talk about, Spindletop and stuff. And then also like what kind of forms of energy will be possibly talking about in the future, like geothermal and some other ones that they want to give a try in Texas.
We've been speaking with managing editor Rosie Hatch. Rosie, before we let you go, that must feel really incredible to be the editor of such an iconic publication. How does it feel?
It's a huge responsibility. And I haven't gotten it right yet. I don't think I might not get it right with the next edition either, but it sure feels like I'm getting better every time, and I hope that people just appreciate all the work that goes into it and how interesting this state can be.
You are far too humble, Rosie, I must say. Rosie Hatch is managing editor of the Texas Almanac. We'll have more at texasstandard.org. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up after the news roundup, we're going to be hearing what the Texas Tribune and ProPublica have found out about what happened in Uvalde on that fateful day, May 24th, 2022. New information coming up on 29 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas Tuition Promise Fund. For over 10 years, helping families lock in current tuition rates and required fees at Texas public colleges and universities, excluding medical and dental institutions. TexasTuitionPromiseFund.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Thomas. 6 people are dead in a series of shootings that stretched from San Antonio to Austin. It started when a high school resource officer was injured yesterday morning. 2 people were killed a few hours later, and 2 more people were killed later that evening. A suspect was arrested after shooting another officer and running from police. Robin Henderson is the interim police chief in Austin.
Based on information obtained over the course of these investigations, we strongly believe one suspect is responsible for all of the incidents. The suspect is in custody and no longer poses a threat to our Austin community.
After the arrest, police discovered 2 more victims at a home near San Antonio connected to the suspect. Another special legislative session has ended in Austin without the passage of Education Savings Accounts, the voucher-like program that would send public dollars to private schools. KERA's Bill Ziebel has more.
Education savings accounts were a priority for Governor Greg Abbott. But in this 4th session, the House pulled them from a comprehensive education funding bill with a push from Democrats and rural Republicans. As a result, the rest of the bill died. It included teacher pay raises and more per-student funding for school districts. Another bill that would have sent more funding to districts for school security also failed this session after the Senate and House couldn't reach a compromise. I'm Bill Ziebel in Dallas.
A 31-year-old Dallas woman is asking a court to let her have an abortion after doctors diagnosed her with a condition that threatens her life and the life of the child. Texas has a strict abortion ban that allows for some procedures to take place, but opponents say the law is unclear. The Center for Reproductive Rights filed the lawsuit on the woman's behalf. The Dallas County District Attorney's Office says thousands of cases could be impacted after some Dallas police body camera footage was deleted. KERA's Tolawani Osibamawo reports the DA's office announced the findings in a statement Tuesday.
The new findings come from a Dallas Police Department review made public earlier this year. It revealed that between 2016 and 2021, police body camera footage was deleted because of the department's video retention policy. Now Dallas police say nearly 600 video files from more than 100 homicide cases were deleted. The DA's office says thousands more cases could be impacted, but both police and the DA's office say there's no evidence the deleted video files have proven material to any cases. I'm Toluwani Osibamawo in Dallas.
I'm Matt Thomas from the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from the law firm of Barron, Adler, Clough, and Odo, exclusively protecting landowners in eminent domain cases throughout Texas for more than 40 years. More at barronadler.com.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. May 24th, 2022, a day everyone in Uvalde and in Texas will remember. It was on that day, just over 18 months ago, a shooter entered Robb Elementary School and killed 19 students and 2 teachers. Much has been written about the botched police response to this tragedy, but a just-published piece from the Texas Tribune and ProPublica includes new information about what the students were doing during the 77 minutes that police waited to confront the shooter. Here to tell us more is Lomi Creel, who co-wrote the story. Lomi, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thanks for having me.
There's been a lot of reporting about this shooting, obviously, in the last 18 months. Tell us a bit more about this new information.
So we used body camera footage, including that stuff that's not been published before, as well as hundreds of interviews that officers, students, and teachers gave to investigators after the shooting. And it really helped us to piece together kind of how those 77 minutes unfolded in their own words, both from the officers and the students. And one of the most startling things we found is that the children and teachers told us and investigators that they did everything that they were taught to do in this situation, including hiding and staying quiet. And in contrast, the officers said that because the children were so quiet, they didn't think that they were inside.
Wow. Obviously, you're underscoring the difference in how the students responded versus how law enforcement responded. From what you can tell, did the students receive more or better training on how to act during a shooting than police did, or the students just better at following protocol, or what conclusion can you draw from that distinction?
So we did a nationwide analysis to look at what students are taught versus what officers are taught, at least what is required of them by law. And what we found was also a startling disparity that at least 37 states have laws mandating active shooter related drills for schools, but in contrast, only Texas and Michigan have laws for this kind of training for officers after they graduate from the academy, which means that officers can go a long time without getting this training.
Well, then one would expect Texas police to be better trained, no?
This law only came about after the Uvalde response. Prior to this, a law only mandated 8 hours for school resource officers.
Well, for those who don't know, what is the protocol for students during an active shooter situation?
What they call generically is run, hide, fight, but generally it's, in this situation, if you can't escape, just hide and be as quiet as possible. Don't identify yourself because you don't know who's at the door, and wait to be rescued, which is what the children of Uvalde said they did.
You examined camera footage. Was it footage from inside the classroom? Am I correct?
We looked at dozens of hours of body camera footage that the officers wore. So it's the response outside the school and inside the wing as they came into that wing. To reconstruct what happened with the children in the classrooms, we listened to the interviews that they themselves gave investigators and spoke to them too.
Why hasn't this information been released to the public before?
The state is fighting the release of barely any information in the investigation into the response. citing in part an ongoing criminal investigation by the Uvalde County District Attorney. We, along with other news organizations, have sued to get this information, and that's ongoing. A judge recently ruled in our favor. But this information that we were able to obtain is incredibly expansive. It includes hundreds of hours of interviews and footage, radio calls, photographs, much more extensive.
I know that in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, there were lots of politicians coming forward saying we're going to pass new laws, we're going to take action to try to improve safety at schools. I know that recently there was a bill designed for that very intent. What's come of all those changes that were promised?
Texas did pass a law last session that now requires 16 hours of active shooter training for every peace officer in the state. That actually makes it the state with the strongest laws requiring active shooter training for police in the country. Very few states require that by law after officers graduate from the academy.
But what about efforts to try to improve security at schools more broadly? Have those gone anywhere?
There have been some school safety improvements from after Santa Fe that was made as well. I think the most recent bill has stalled given the status of the special session.
We've been speaking with Lomi Creel, an investigative reporter at ProPublica and the Texas Tribune. We'll link to the latest reporting at texasstandard.org. Lomi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Oncology, helping patients understand how voluntary involvement in clinical trials can help provide medical innovations in the prevention and treatment of cancer. More at texasoncology.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. A fifth grader from Pflugerville ISD is heading to the National Spanish Spelling Bee in El Paso. Becky Fogel of KUT in Austin was at the district's local spelling bee over the weekend to check out the competition.
Buenos días a todos. ¿Cómo están? ¿Contentos? ¿Emocionados? Eso. Muy bien.
Pflugerville ISD interpreter and translator Stephanie Sanior welcomed students and their families to the district's annual Spanish Spelling Bee on a sunny Saturday morning. The cafeteria at River Oaks Elementary was brimming with anticipation as Sanior outlined the rules for the competition. Then it was time to start.
Y bueno, entonces ahora estamos listos para comenzar nuestro emocionante concurso de deletreo en español. Les pido un gran aplauso para todos estos concursantes.
24 elementary school students sat in maroon chairs on a glossy stage. One by one, they approached the microphone to spell words like antiguo and llave.
L-L-A-V-E, llave.
The 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders participating in the Spanish Spelling Bee had spent about 2 months preparing for this moment. They hailed from 11 campuses with dual language programs. Jennifer Harrell is the district's dual language coordinator.
It is quite a lengthy list of words that they have to study. So they do start in October. Our most successful students usually study 3 or 4 times a week. So some of them meet after school for about an hour with their coach to study, and others work at home with their parents.
Sanior says one thing that makes the spelling bee challenging is that students must clarify certain letters and include the correct accents.
So if they say canción, song, right, and they say, okay, C-I-N-C-I-O-N, and they forget the accent, they're disqualified too. So it's very sad to see that because, they're trying really hard.
But 4th grade dual language teacher Jonathan Masagosa says students learn from the experience no matter how far they get. He coached 4 of his students for the spelling bee.
I think it drives them to be like, okay, well, you learn from failure. So it's okay. Like, hey, look at how far you made it. It's better than not doing anything, right?
The Spanish Spelling Bee, which Pflugerville ISD has been holding for more than a decade, also gives students in Central Texas a pretty unique opportunity. Harrell says it appears to be the only event of its kind in the region. And she adds, it's vital to show students and families a variety of languages have value in the district, especially as the emergent bilingual student population grows.
Having a spelling bee that promotes their academic development is really important, and it really shows them that what they bring to the table, that language, sometimes their heritage language or their native language, is valued here in our district.
Within Pflugerville ISD, students speak more than 100 languages. The top 3 are English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Data the district provided show the emergent bilingual student population has increased by more than 40% since 2021. And other school districts in Central Texas are seeing a similar trend.
So I would love to help any district in our area that would be willing to start a Spanish spelling bee in their district. Yeah, it's a great way to promote Spanish within their dual language programs.
The winner of Pflugerville ISD Spanish Spelling Bee automatically advances to the national one because there isn't a regional competition. And Saturday's event came down to 2 students from Copperfield Elementary. 5th grader Luis ended up winning with the word piragüismo.
P-I-R-A-G-U con diéresis I-S-M-O, piragüismo. I was quite surprised to win. I never expected this to happen, and I'm really glad.
Even though Luis seemed calm, cool, and collected throughout the spelling bee, he says that wasn't the case.
My heart was like thumping.
Pflugerville ISD is going to pay for Luis, his spelling bee coach, and a parent to go to the National Spelling Bee in El Paso.
I'm excited. I've never gone to El Paso before.
With a big smile on his face, Luis thanked his teachers, coach, parents, and friends for their support. I'm Becky Fogel in Pflugerville.
Some 550 miles from AT&T Stadium, you'll find a Dallas Cowboys celebratory tradition that is unique in the state. Well, you might expect it in Dallas or Arlington, but to find this 3-decade tradition thriving in a Brownsville neighborhood, it's both surprising and perhaps a bit heartwarming. It's called La Pitada. Our commentator W.F. Strong has more.
Puro pinche Cowboys! La Pitada in this case means the honking. After every Dallas Cowboys victory, hundreds of vehicles and a few thousand people hit the street of Southmost Road in Brownsville in a cacophony of honking, whistling, and victorious gritos. It is a movable feast, a sacred rite of celebration for the Cowboys faithful. It is a mobile tailgate party, an impromptu parade. Fans drive slowly, honking vigorously, windows down, collectively expressing their joy. And to make it all the more joyful, taquerias scent the air with their aromatic spices. After the Dallas win last Thursday night, my wife said, "Vamos a la pitada." Lupita likes it mostly for our daughter Scarlett, who loves a parade, especially one she can be in. I like that there's no official proclamation or sponsor that makes the pitada happen. There's nothing top-down about it. It is a grassroots tradition. It is of the people, by the people, and for the people. All that is needed is a Cowboys win. That's it. As soon as that happens, la gente jump in whatever vehicle is handy, wearing cowboy hats, caps, and helmets, and take off with window flags flapping in the breeze. Some kids stand up through the sunroofs, waving pennants. Many dogs are along for the ride, decked out in their official Cowboys regalia. Horns are honked in short staccato bursts and long sustained blasts. Air horns and dump trucks are common. One guy at an auto repair shop along the route uses a compressor to salute passersby with his stationary air horn that is so loud it seems to rock your vehicle when you pass by. Celebratory whistles never cease. "Go Cowboys" is heard often, but the most common mantra of all is "Puro pinche Cowboys," which translated is, well, let's just say, "How about them Cowboys?" Puro pinche Cowboys! The Cowboys Nation of Southmost is joined by others from across Brownsville and neighboring communities. Those not living close by log in to live Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok feeds. Checking in from the Metroplex and even Chicago, New York, and L.A. How did all this come to be? La Pitada started in the glory days of the 1990s when the Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls. In the late 70s, the Cowboys came to be known as America's team, but they also became Mexico's team because Spanish-language broadcasts of the Cowboy games had been on the air in Mexico since the late 60s. Cowboys, Vaqueros. Translates quite well. This is significant because Southmost is an old immigrant community where Spanish is the first language of the majority of people. They have strong familial ties to Mexico. It helped that the Cowboys for decades had kickers with roots in Mexico and soccer, Villanueva, Herrera, and Septien. If the Dallas Cowboys win the Super Bowl this year, I think the Pitada will be legendary. Might just be bigger than Dallas. I'm W.F. Strong. These are stories from Texas. Some of them are true.
Dallas Cowboys, Cowboy football.
W.F. Strong is a professor of culture and communication at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. You can check out more of his stories from Texas and Texas Co-op Power magazine and wherever fine podcasts are served.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Enel North America, generating renewable energy with projects run by and for Texans, investing in the future of local communities, schools, and small businesses. Learn more at enelnorthamerica.com/Texas.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Heading into winter, many Texans are wondering how the state's electricity infrastructure will hold up once temperatures plunge. ERCOT recently said that there could be a chance of rolling power outages next month, making some nervous that a repeat of the 2021 blackouts could be possible. But not everyone is fretting. Chris Tomlinson, business columnist for the Houston Chronicle, writes that despite the warnings, he's feeling good about the grid. He joins us now. Chris, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Well, thanks for having me back, David.
You know, with so many people understandably worried about the grid stability after 2021, why do you seem optimistic?
Well, I don't think that we're going to make the same mistakes we made last time. There are a number of issues. One is the state is watching very closely. The ERCOT's been highly politicized. The governor and lieutenant governor have read the riot act to the industry. And I think they know they've got a good thing going in the Texas grid, and they're not going to mess it up.
I've got to follow up. You mentioned that the grid has sort of been politicized, and that does seem to be the case. Isn't that usually a bad thing when it comes to policy?
Yes, we make a lot of really bad decisions, and the legislature did consider some really bad laws. But I think what it also does is put the CEOs of the private companies that run the grid on notice. It lets them know that if they like the competitive wholesale market where they make a lot of money, if they like the retail electricity market where they make a lot of money, they need to not screw it up like they did in 2021.
Well, now, what do you make then in that context of this recent outlook from ERCOT warning of a 16% chance of outages in January? That obviously raises a lot of concerns among a lot of Texans.
Well, I don't think we've ever had a better forecast. In the past, ERCOT only had to tell us twice a year whether or not they think they had enough juice. And they have always said, oh, no, we'll be fine. And what happened? We got Winter Storm Uri, which, killed hundreds of Texans in a year that they said they had plenty of power. So now the legislature says you have to report to us every month, and you actually have to calculate the risks for every hour of every day. And lo and behold, it's a 16% chance of outages if there is another severe winter storm.
And I guess this gets at the issue of managing expectations, too. But I'm curious, when it comes to substantive change, what's happened since the 2021 storm that might improve the grid stability, if anything, as you see it?
Well, we do have inspectors going out to the individual power plants and inspecting them to make sure that they're prepared for winter, to make sure that necessary steps have been taken. We do have the Railroad Commission putting more pressure on the pipeline companies and the natural gas producers, who are really the ones who screwed up the most during Winter Storm Uri. So, there are just a lot more eyes on these folks. And as I said, Dan Patrick has indicated to the lobbyists that, if there is another power outage, that he's going to re-regulate the market and take away the gravy train they've been enjoying for the last 20 years.
We should point out, you mentioned the Texas Railroad Commission for newcomers to Texas. That's the organization, the agency that regulates, the commission that regulates power in Texas. What is still lacking when it comes to trying to make the grid more robust as you see it, Chris?
Well, nationally, the standard is to have only a 10% chance of outages in a severe winter storm. So that's what we need to work toward. The big fight now, and I think it will continue to be for at least the next 5 years, is how do we improve that reliability? Do we do it with more natural gas power plants? Do we do it with batteries? Do we do it with geothermal? The oil and gas industry is very powerful in Texas. They want to be the primary source of backup power, but we also have a lot of clean energy technologies that make sense with climate change. So we need more backup power. The argument now is going to be over where do we get it and do we have enough of it?
Chris Tomlinson is business columnist for the Houston Chronicle. We'll link to his latest at texasstandard.org. Chris, thanks again.
Thank you, David.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Wells Dunbar is our social media editor, and he's back as promised with more listener comments and what's happening online. Wells, welcome back.
That's right, David. Yeah, continuing to hear from folks about the end of the fourth legislative special session. Can you really call them special after this many?
Not so special.
Yes, leaving town for now, at least. James Art Exum notes another legislative session plus 4 specials, yet Texas foster care is still a mess. Echoing, I believe that was our lead story yesterday.
Yeah, it was.
Latest details there. You can go to texasstandard.org for more on that court hearing that might place Texas foster care system in contempt of court again. And as I said, for now, you talked about this at the top of the show. You wrote about this in the Texas Standard newsletter, I believe, as well, David. These rumblings that we may have a 5th special session, possibly after the holidays. Who can say? Entirely up to the discretion of the governor, Greg Abbott, to call those legislators back into town. Well, hearing from folks about other stories on today's show, Judy Rector points out the remarkable and poignant Frontline documentary on the Robb Elementary Massacre. That, of course, produced in tandem with that investigative report we heard from our friends at the Texas Tribune and ProPublica midway through the show there. A very sobering report that really, as we heard, sort of depicted the events of that day in the words of the officers that were there. Judy Rector says, "It broke my heart and made me furious at the same time. If officers are so fearful to go against a madman with an AR-type rifle, why in the Sam Hill are they legal to purchase?" Judy writes. So definitely, new developments there in a story that we've been tracking, ever since that day in 2022.
And hats off to the outstanding reporting work that's been done by the Texas Tribune and ProPublica on this. They've been sifting through mountains of videotape, transcripts of interviews, filing Freedom of Information requests, going to court, trying to get information out. So a lot of work, and we encourage you to visit texastribune.org for more. It's really terrific reporting.
Yes, and as you said, party to a lawsuit, I believe that the Texas DPS, Department of Public Safety, was ordered to turn over that information. Of course, they have, I believe, at least another week or so to appeal that decision, so has not been formally released yet. Well, also on our Facebook page, Robert Flood takes note of some news that occurred. The passing of writer, director, and activist Norman Lear. He says, "I am amazed at his impact on American entertainment and his commitment to social engagement." Indeed, a real groundbreaking talent there, producer behind All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Good Times, dead at the age of 101.
Wells Dunbar continues to monitor your comments. We're out of time for today's program, but you can keep up with the news 24/7, texasstandard.org. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Kristen Cabrera, Alexandra Hart, Michael Marks, Gloria Martinez, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonzo is our digital producer. Leah Scarpelli is our director. Casey Cheeks, our technical director. Kristen's been filling in for Leah as she works ahead. We hope you can join us again tomorrow.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Waldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington family, and St. David's Foundation. Additionally, Texas Mutual Insurance Company is a founding sponsor of Texas Standard.
You ever been there when an uncomfortable question about race comes up, but you don't know how to answer? That's where Code Switch lives. Each week, we're talking about race and how it intersects with every other aspect of your life, from politics and pop culture to history and food. Listen now to the Code Switch podcast from NPR.